Hello everybody, welcome to the Wine with Jimmy channel. I'm your host Jimmy Smith and thank you so much for stopping by. This is a channel that fulfills all of your needs regarding wine education to give you the confidence to pass examinations in the world of wine. So this is a diploma focused video. So this is the wine production for the WSET level 4. And this is looking at maturation and the role of oxygen within maturation. As always, if you have any comments, questions or concerns, you can get in touch by the comments section below this video, and also make sure you click subscribe for weekly updates, or by the social media you see at the bottom of every slide, or direct at info@winewithjimmy.com. Okay, so let's begin looking at the world of maturation, which is a part of what we call the general winemaking options, and this is specifically the role of O2. And this is a very important topic. The very famous alchemist and chemist Louis Pasteur called oxygen the enemy of wine. However, chemistry has proven that this is, of course, far from the truth. Now, of course, oxygen can be the enemy, but it could also be a very, very important friend as well. And it's understanding the interaction that oxygen has with wine in terms of how it shapes styles. Now, once alcoholic fermentation and malolactic conversion, if it is allowed to happen, and when they have been carried out, the wine can either be finished or packaged relatively quickly, and of course therefore very sort of more mass-produced inexpensive styles, or it can be matured for some kind of time before being bottled. And there are a number of reasons behind that, and that's what we will go through, of course. Here you are. So we are just going to go through a little bit of an introduction around maturation. Then I'm going to get into the list of the role of oxygen, because maturation just needs its own kind of introduction to begin with. So I just mentioned that you could have sort of more inexpensive mass-produced wines that may be bottled actually very quickly after being made and sent to market. We're going to talk a little bit around those styles, but also the young, fruity or aromatic styles. So these styles are the ones that will often have been protected from oxygen throughout the process of making those styles. So examples would, of course, be things like Vinho Verde from Portugal, Italian Pinot Grigio, or things like New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, for example. Okay, these are likely to be protected against oxygen during the winemaking stage to best retain their very aromatic primary characters, which, of course, that wine is built around that style. So it's a good idea to protect those. They may also be stored in vessels that, of course, do not allow oxygen to affect them. They are impermeable to oxygen. So these are, of course, the likes of stainless steel, or things like concrete, as long as it has an epoxy-lined inner resin in the inside of the vat. And they're also often, these wine styles that are produced in these vessels, protected with inert gases, very commonly things like sulfur dioxide, but other gases as well, carbon dioxide, and even some fancier ones like argon, for example. And as mentioned, these are likely to be finished and packaged very quickly after being made, and of course then really sent out quite quickly to destination markets. Now, there's such a quick turnover here because some winemakers of larger productions will in fact only do this bottling for a customer when the order comes in. And that's when wine is stored in bulk, of course. So they will probably store the wine or ship the wine in bulk. And when orders come in, of course, with their big international clients, this, of course, is when the wine will be bottled and packaged. Storing the wine in bulk means that the winery has much more flexibility when it comes to, of course, the sale of the wine throughout the year. And this depends on demands. It can be packaged with different labels, sold in bulk, or blended with other wines, of course. Storage in bulk is often more efficient in terms of winery space than the same volume of wine kept in stacks of bottles, for example. So if you've got big vats of wine stored, you know, that's an efficient use of space. But then when you've got things like bottles and cartons, then of course sitting on top of each other, this will take up more space. And it also means wine labels are less likely to get dirty or become ruined by things like humidity, because of course you are storing the wine in bulk and not in bottle. Okay, so we also have looked in a previous video, and please do have a look at this, at the advantages and disadvantages of bulk shipping, and that can be found in the transportation of wine. So have a look at that video. Okay, so that's on the young and fruity styles. Now just a little bit about, of course, the matured styles. So in comparison, winemakers for these styles will, of course, opt to mature their wines for short periods of time after fermentation, of course, deeming it as essential for determining the style and, of course, their quality of that wine that they are looking for. The key factors are listed on the slide you can see there. So what has an influence on the wine is, of course, the role of oxygen, how that will interact with the wine. Things like new wood, and of course then many things linked to that in terms of the origin and the size and so on, but also the yeast lees, the dead yeast cells. Not all of these are used completely. It can be one or two of them. It completely depends on the philosophy of the winemaking team and, of course, what they are looking to produce. Now, blending can have a significant impact on the wine style, quality, and the price of wine. And although it may take place at any point of the winemaking process, it is often actually carried out after maturation, but of course before bottling. Okay, so that's the little introduction here to maturation. Now let's get into the first of our three parts we're looking at in the role of oxygen. So this is part one, the introduction to the role of oxygen. Part two will look at wooden vessels and oxygen. And then part three will look at micro-oxygenation. Both parts 2 and 3 are only available on my e-learning portal available at winewithjimmy.com, which is a wonderful portal that will help you with your studies and your revision as you are aiming towards your diploma. Lots of things on there, such as sample test questions, short written answers, but of course, exclusive video content. We have about 25% of our videos up on YouTube for the diploma, and the rest is only available on the e-learning portal. Okay, so let's get rocking and rolling, talking about the role of oxygen. So oxygen, let's talk about what it does to the wine. And oxidation will react with wine, and those reactions lead to a number of changes in aromas and phenolic compounds in the wine. So of course it can have an absolute important marked effect on the wine style and quality. So generally speaking, oxidation will lead to a gradual reduction in many primary aromas. Primary aromas, of course, being those that are produced from the grape itself or by fermentation. And also then moving into the development of tertiary aromas produced by age. So here you've got that clearly being identified on the screen. So primary characteristics, of course, including things like floral compounds, fruit, herbaceous, herbal, and others, amongst others. And then moving to tertiary compounds, such as dried fruits and bottle age for both white and red. So you'll see there primary compounds there like apple, peach, and floral. Tertiary, things like nuts and dried fruits, dried apricots on the right-hand side of your screen. Now, if the primary aromas then develop into wanted, pleasant tertiary aromas, and the wine will have enough body, texture, or structure for extended aging, of course, this will add to the complexity and enhancing the quality of that wine style. There is quite a sweet spot when you are talking about the age of a wine, when it does move from primary, but you still have some primal compounds, and then moving into the tertiary. And that, for me, really is where you get the complexity within wine. Now, if it goes too far, of course, that can be an issue when there's no or very little primary left and the wine has much more tertiary compounds and may seem to lose its sense of freshness or youthful character, which can be an issue. So that will be where you tend to find a wine being flat or stale. Certainly if it's replaced by tertiary compounds that are not necessarily wanted, or in fact they are just dulled out, which can be a huge problem. So that really is the first thing, talking about how it moves from primary into tertiary. Now, the next one is around the colour of wines, both at the winemaking stage and later in bottle and in glass. So oxidation affects colour of wines, we know this. So with exposure to oxygen, white wines generally will become darker in intensity, and they turn from being generally sort of lemon or gold towards a brown. And that's what you can see on the bottom row of glasses. So a slightly more lighter intensity on the left-hand side and more of a lemony gold color. And then as it heads through the middle, the color changes from being bright to a bit duller. So it goes to like a duller gold and then eventually towards things like amber and brown, but also becomes deeper in intensity. Exposing a red wine to oxygen can result in greater color stability and intensity. In this reaction, the compounds that give pigments and color, the anthocyanins, bind with tannins. And this, for example, protects the anthocyanins from being absorbed by yeast lees or bleached by sulfur dioxide addition. So we're talking here with a bit of exposure to oxygen at the winemaking stage to give better color stabilization. This is really quite important for wine styles, red wine styles that are lighter in color. For example, classically, Pinot Noir. And then if we talk about red wines in terms of being made as a wine and bottle aging, red wines will generally become paler and browner. So yes, if you look at the similarity to white wines, there is that brownness where the wines head towards. But in terms of intensity, there is an opposite. The reds generally become paler, whereas the whites generally become deeper. Okay, so that is your color change, but also mentioning stabilization of color for red wines at an early stage. The next area is talking about softening of tannins. So for red wines, oxidation reactions also will seem to result in the softening of tannins. And this, of course, may be a positive for quality, certainly in areas where tannins can be quite high or quite firm and maybe even a little bit astringent. It may need that oxygen reaction just to soften the edge. And examples of that may be things like Nebbiolo, for example, in Piemonte in Italy. This is a variety which has an exceptionally huge amount of tannic capability, and exposing it to oxygen in the winemaking stage will tend to soften that tannin. And that's why, in fact, there are mandated laws in things like Barbaresco and Barolo in terms of really softening that amount of tannin. Okay, but one little caveat we must mention here is that this is an area of science of wine where it is not really that well understood, and it may be partly linked to anthocyanin and tannin bonding as well, but more and more studies are being carried out on this topic. The role of oxygen within the speed and volume of oxidation. So the speed of oxidation is influenced by, of course, the amount of oxygen exposure. The compounds in the wine, as well as temperature, amongst other factors too. So wine that is fully exposed to air, and therefore, of course, oxygen, which is a component of air, will generally, of course, oxidize quicker than when oxygen exposure is gentle and more gradual. So, for example, when wine is kept in very large vats. So, that being said, we do need to just have a fundamental understanding that red wines, in comparison to white wines, will be more capable at defending themselves against oxidation due to their higher content of anti-oxidative phenolic compounds. So this, of course, is where tannin comes in as the protector of red wine in comparison to whites, which will have little or no tannins, generally speaking. So this is, of course, the reason why red wines are, of course, aged longer than white wines for the most part. You'll see that maybe 12 to 24 months is actually quite common pre-bottling for reds, whereas 6 to 12 months, so more than half, well, sorry, less than half of the time in comparison to reds for white wines. And temperature is important too. So warm temperatures tend to speed up oxidative reactions. Sometimes this is actually utilized as a positive. So with some styles in the Douro Valley in Portugal, certainly for ports, now classically port is aged in Vila Nova de Gaia, opposite Oporto on the coast, on the Atlantic, for the gradual aging due to the moderating effect of the Atlantic. But some, certainly inexpensive tawnies, are actually aged in the Douro Valley for Portugal, the upper part of their Douro Valley, where it is much hotter, more continental, and the wines will age quicker due to the heat that's there. They oxidize quicker, which is actually very important for the tawny category. So, of course, this is actually also in general wine storage as well. So this is why, of course, we tend to store wine in cellars at around 12 to 15 for gradual aging to help those compounds bind together at a more gradual rate. Whereas if it's warmer or it's been affected by heat, the possibility of aging actually can be outstripped. Now, I know this from personal experience, sadly, because one of my wine cellars was affected by a fire where the wines were being stored, not directly by the fire itself, but by heat, which was produced from it. And of course, a number of my bottles were damaged and some were fine. But really, I would not like to age them for much longer because the capability has been lost due to the exposure of heat. Okay, and then the extreme volumes of oxidation is our last point here. And I've kind of just alluded to this a little bit with tawny in port, for example. Now, a high level of oxidation is sometimes a very key and integral part of the style of some wines. I just mentioned tawny, but also things like Oloroso sherries down in Andalusia in South Spain. The oxidation evident from the brown color of the wine, the lack of fresh fruit on the palate, is actually then replaced by tertiary compounds, such as things like dried fruits and nuts. And this is absolutely fine in this style. In this case, the wine is matured for a number of years in barrels that are not topped up or filled up. And this allows oxygen within the head space of the barrel, as you can see in this diagram, which is called ullage. So this is that head space there. Now, of course, you have an effect, ignore the white scribbling out there, but you have an effect of oxygen because there's more oxygen contact in terms of the ratio to the wine in comparison to wines that are normally topped up to the right to the top here and regularly topped up to stop this effect from happening. More commonly, for unfortified reds and white wines, the exposure is limited, like I mentioned, and has a much slower and subtle effect. And too much oxidation in those styles of wine, so this is still unfortified wines, is considered a fault. But for fortified styles, Oloroso, things like Tawny, and some others in the world that are not fortified, things like Vin Jaune, but there's a different production method there entirely as well, it is actually something which is quite desirable. Okay, so that brings me to the end of this first part, the role of oxygen in maturation in terms of general winemaking options. Part 2 will be on oxygen and wooden vessels. Part 3 on micro-oxygenation. Both of those parts are only available on my e-learning portal. That's at winewithjimmy.com. As always, if you do have any comments, any questions, any concerns, you can scribble away on the comments section of this video. And please make sure you click subscribe because you'll get updates on a weekly basis. You can also get in touch with the social media you see at the bottom of every slide, or direct at info@winewithjimmy.com. Thank you so much for watching the video. I really hope to see you soon. Please do come and visit us if you find yourself in London, in the United Kingdom. You know I've got a bar and school, so come and see me for a class, a glass, or a bottle. I've been Jimmy Smith. Thank you.